Hello, can you guys hear me? Is my audio coming through? I'm live. Okay, great. Well, hello, everyone. I'm happy to be here and share a little bit with you. I'm going to talk a little bit about the opportunity of using systems thinking and the broader idea of systemic design, which takes systems thinking and design together to work on some of our business problems and some of the larger problems that humanity has. So I'll just go ahead and share my slides here, get those ready to go. And let me see. I have been having some problems with I don't know what's going on. Let me try reloading these really quickly. My slides are not opening up properly. Give me just a second here. Sorry about this, folks. I think it might be connection related. Get up my hotspot in case that's needed. Switch over to that and see if that fixes the problem. Sorry for the delay. Got the connection changed. Okay, looks like it's reloading. Great. Okay. Okay, slides are up. Let me just share that and we can dig in. Oh, that's right. I'm just going to share my screen. That will be easier at this point, I think. Okay. Can you folks see my slides now? I can't see. Let me check. Yes. Okay. Excellent. Finally, I can go. Sorry for the delay. So I'm going to talk about leading sustainability through increasing uncertainty using a systems-based approach. I'm Chris Oestreich. I lead linear to circular and morph. I'll talk a little bit about those. So some of my background, I did zero waste programs at Albertsons and SuperValue in the U.S. Working there, we did our goal when I was working there was try to get 90% of our waste out of the landfills and to productive uses, and to try to do so in a way that benefited the company financially. I also run a small press called Wicked Problems Collaborative that looks at humanity's biggest problems and tries to put forth ideas about how we can do things better, move in better directions. I co-founded a group called the Circular Design Lab with 3 of my colleagues at Thammasat University here in Bangkok. And what we do is teach systemic design, what I'm here to talk about today, to community members who want to work on these sorts of big, messy, complex challenges with systems thinking and design together. Lately, I've been doing a lot of teaching at Thammasat, teaching in the social enterprise program, teaching in the innovation program, consulting through my firm Linear to Circular, and probably most of my focus has been on launching an upcycling brand called Morph, where we're trying to help people see the value of resources by taking things that would go to landfill and make nice products, consumer goods that are useful and durable and can last a long time from something that otherwise would have just gone straight to the landfill. So I already introduced that. I'll go ahead and jump back. So let's talk a little bit about the weather lately. The climate, we know climate change has been coming at us for a while, and I'm guessing you guys have probably been hearing this repetitively from the speakers, but I just want to kind of go into a few of these things because we've been getting warnings from scientists for decades, and those warnings have just been amping up and amping up. And it really feels like to me in the last year that we've really hit this point where it's not that thing we're waiting for or that's going to come someday or that's having a little bit of an impact, but that the climate is really starting to wobble. And so that we're not suddenly seeing some dramatic increase in temperature anywhere or anything like that, but we are starting to see a lot more of the, the additional moisture in the atmosphere coming through in getting floods and heat waves and all these sorts of things. So just a few things that have happened just in 2023. June was Europe's hottest month on record. Some of these temperatures are just, terrifying. I mean, look down in Tunis, it was 46, 47 degrees Celsius back in July for some days. I mean, just really some scary temperatures. Rome had its highest recorded temperature in July. Globally, July was the hottest month on record. August followed July as the second hottest month on record, and it was significantly warmer than any August in recorded history. I'm assuming most of the crowd is a sustainability crowd. You probably know what a boiling frog is. I showed this slide to my wife, and she said, "What the heck is that?" And I explained it to her, and she said, "You better explain what that is." So I'll go ahead and do that. The idea of a boiling frog is it's said that if you put a frog in a pot of water and you turn the water up slowly enough, it will sit in there and just allow the water to cook it. Basically, it won't jump out because it doesn't notice the change in temperature. And that's basically it's a metaphor for what humanity is doing to itself. So don't actually want to cook any frogs, but do want to think about what we're doing to ourselves potentially these days. So in response to what happened with these heat waves, Samantha Burgess, who is the deputy head of the EU's Copernicus Climate Change Service, said, "We will continue to see more climate records and more intense and frequent extreme weather events impacting society and ecosystems until we stop emitting greenhouse gases." And we are nowhere near stopping emitting greenhouse gases. These are daily sea surface temperatures, recent daily sea surface temperatures. You can see, I don't think I need to explain how worrisome that current line is. It's just so far off track. And you can see, I mean, there are occasional dips and jumps over the record here over the many years since 1979 that are included in this. But this is getting a little scary, what we're starting to see. Phoenix, Arizona broke a record with 54 days over 43.3 degrees Celsius. South America has a heat wave in the middle of winter. They're like 47 degrees Celsius in some parts of Brazil recently. And the climatologist Maximiliano Herrera said this is one of the most extreme events the world has ever seen. It's not supposed to be 47 degrees Celsius in winter, obviously. We've had wildfires. In Canada, the previous record for wildfires was 7.6 million hectares. By the beginning of September, they were 15 million hectares. I took a trip out west with my family in the U.S. this summer, and we drove through South Dakota. The center of South Dakota is about 400 miles from the Canadian border. And this is what it looked like. We were 400 miles. Oh, let's get this to play. Oh, gosh. I may be having not a strong enough internet. Well, I think you can see from how cloudy it is, even though it's not properly playing, the air quality was very poor where we were. This was in the center of South Dakota, driving along the highway. And this was an air quality map at the time. So you can see there's a lot of green out west, some yellow in the southeast, and then in the upper Midwest towards the east, it was red and purple, the purple being the worst air quality because of the fires, or at least the fires being a major contributor. Now, at the time, we were over here in the green. Let me show you this again. So this is what it looked like. It's going to play now? Of course not. This is what the air looked like, and we were in one of the good areas. Can you imagine if you were around Chicago, Milwaukee, anywhere around there, Indianapolis, where it was really bad? We were hundreds of miles away from the fire, and it was going east of us. So just pretty shocking. I used to live out that way, and you have a lot of forest fires in the West, but I had never seen any air quality that poor. And then to see that we weren't even close to the worst of it was just shocking. Floods have been happening everywhere. It seems to be major flash flooding going on every week in 2 or 3 parts of the world. There's always been floods. There's always been flash floods. But I can't remember turning on the TV and seeing cars floating away in large numbers in different parts of the world multiple times, seemingly every week. In northeastern India's Assam state, Flooding displaced 400,000 people in June. In July, over 1 million people in Hebei in China. In August, flooding in Slovenia, Austria, and Croatia caused hundreds of mudslides and the evacuations of villages. This stuff, it just seems to be going on all over the place suddenly. Droughts. We're having massive flash floods in some places. In other places, terrible droughts. Horn of Africa has been in drought since 2019. I mean, it's one of the poorest places in the world. People are already struggling, and now for 4 years straight, they've had widespread crop failures, water shortages, food insecurity, famine. It's displaced millions of people. The shocking thing that I read about this was the UN warned that the situation could be catastrophic. If that's not catastrophic, I don't know what catastrophic is. I look at that and I look at that quote and it's shocking to me. It just almost feels like there's an attempt to downplay how bad the situation is. That is, to me, a horrific situation. And the thing is, as business leaders, we can choose to turn a blind eye to these things. But when you displace millions of people, and if these problems keep growing, then those problems will eventually become everyone's problems. Wherever you are, the millions of people who are getting displaced from these places where there's no food are going to come to where you are, where there is food. So what can we do as business people to start righting the ship so that these problems don't continue to grow? That's where I'm coming from. The US, nearly a quarter of the land mass is in moderate to severe drought. And look where it is, the Midwest and the South. I mean, the only parts of the US where we grow a lot of food, California and around Florida, those are the only parts that aren't having severe drought where a lot of our food is grown. Huge portion of our food is grown in these places, and they have moderate to severe ongoing drought. Turkey set a temperature record in August, 49.5 degrees Celsius. Turkey, Greece, and Bulgaria have all recently experienced serious flash floods. Over in Greece, the climate crisis and civil protection minister, I mean, you have a climate crisis minister in Greece. I mean, I think that's a very good thing, considering the circumstances. But the fact that we need climate crisis ministers should tell us something about where we're headed. He said this is the most extreme phenomenon in terms of the maximum amount of rain in a 24-hour period since records began in the country. And they had, I know in some places, they had 2 to 3 years worth of rain in like a 1 to 2 day period. It's just shocking because of the, I think it was 2 low pressure systems that trapped the water in between, and it just kept pouring. The problem is I've been reading that this is expected to become common now because of what we've done to the climate. This is going to be a regular thing. It was in Greece this year. Maybe it goes a little west, maybe it goes a little east, but we should expect that maybe it won't happen next year, but it's likely to become a relatively common thing. It's a frightening thought. So this is the way I think of us to this point. This quote from J.K. Galbraith, I think, really kind of captures where we are. He says, short-run public inaction, even if held to be alarming as to consequence, is always preferred to protective long-run action. We take the easy out. We assume that things will be okay, that someone will figure something out, or it won't go as badly as expected, and then we kind of hope for the best. And that's kind of been the response in general to climate so far. And it's obviously not working. So the way I see it now is this is climate, and this is still us, and it's screaming at us and saying, let's go. If you don't do something differently, I'm going to destroy you. And, we're still kind of going, no, not, we're still trying to go about things as if it's the same, and it isn't, unfortunately. So it's time to heed the call. And I believe that we need systemic design to do this. A number of reasons I believe this. Systemic design is it's the pairing of systems thinking and design. Systems thinking is a way of viewing the world, of trying to understand circumstances, of challenges in a much deeper and broader way, so as to be better able to devise better solutions. They're the kind of problems that you don't really solve typically. What you typically do is get better outcomes, more desirable outcomes, reduce the unintended consequences and the harms that come out of the systems that we have. And what we want to do is continually get better and better and better. Systemic design helps us with that because the better we understand the circumstances we're working with, what's going on, the forces that exist and how they're interacting, the more likely we are to design something that pushes things in the direction we want to go without creating those unintended consequences that we unfortunately so often have. So what is it? It's an approach to problem solving that combines the two areas of systems thinking and design thinking. Typically, when you're using them in early stages of projects and programs, you'll use lots of systems thinking up front to start really getting a deeper understanding of what you're dealing with. And then you'll use more and more design thinking as you get that broader and deeper understanding. You start bringing in design thinking elements and proposing ideas and testing those ideas, and then you kind of hand it back and forth, using less and less systems thinking and more design thinking as you move through a program. And that's if you're doing like a formal program. But these tools and methodologies and these ways of thinking, they can help you all the time. You don't have to have a formal program. You can bring these tools, these mindsets, and use them for any complex problem that you're dealing with in your business. And it can be really useful for just looking at what's going on and thinking about, is this a big problem? Is this a complex problem? Should we be potentially putting, the serious resources that it takes to look at it with systemic design method? Or is this more of a complicated problem that just requires expertise and just hand it over to the experts to solve it? I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. So it's a holistic, collaborative process that seeks to understand the nature of a system and then uses design methods to develop innovative solutions that address the root causes of the problem while working to avoid unintended consequences. I'll say some of these ideas I tend to repeat over and over and over and over because they're absolutely critical, and I want to make sure that if anything else, those ideas stick. So why does it matter? It's used to address complex problems that cannot be solved by traditional approaches. It's a collaborative process that involves stakeholders from all levels of the system. It's iterative and adaptive, meaning that it is constantly evolving as new information is learned. This is really, really important. Typically, we're used to developing a project and saying, okay, this is what we know, this is what we're going to do. And once those decisions are made, you just go. With systems thinking, you start to go, but if you learn more and you realize, oh, that's not going to work the way we thought it was, or here's a new opportunity that we can fold into this project, you can take a step back and go, well, does it make sense to change what we're doing, or should we continue on the same path? Whereas in a more traditional project approach, you typically, you put on blinders and you just force through to the end, and then you can bring in that new idea if you want to, if you have the time and the resources. This is more of an iterative approach where you agree up front that you're going to take in new information and consider it along the way and see if there is a need or opportunity to change your approach as you're going. So it's a powerful tool for creating sustainable and resilient solutions to complex problems. So why do we need systems thinking? The Cynefin framework is from Dave Snowden. He's got an article with Mary Boone, I believe, in the Harvard Business Review. It's called A Leader's Framework for Decision Making. Really worth a read. Very clear, straightforward article, teaches a ton of useful concepts that are related to systems thinking, teaches the framework, and helps you think about problems in a very new light. Human nature, we tend to look at problems as being problems that go into one bucket. They're all of the same sort. Snowden's framework helps you look at problems in a different way. So you got these 4 buckets that the problems can be sorted into. First one is clear. This is something that we automatically know what needs to be done without having any expertise. This could be like a car having a flat tire. Your car's got a flat tire. You know that you either need to get that repaired or get that tire replaced. You don't need to be a mechanic to know what needs to be done. You may not be able to repair it yourself. You take it to a shop, get it towed, and they take care of it for you. Complicated is the next step up. That's where you need expertise. Say you go to turn your car on and nothing happens. Now, I know nothing about cars, so I'm not going to even try. I'm not going to fix that. I'm going to take it to a mechanic. They're going to go and dig in, figure out what's going on. They may have 2 or 3 ways to fix the car. They may repair a part, they may replace a part, but they generally have the knowledge that's needed to repair that car. So would be something we'd call complicated. It's what we would determine as good practice. This is the domain of experts. So they sense the problem, they analyze it, and then they respond appropriately. The next one over is the one that I'm concerned with today. The complex area, these are emergent practices. These are problems like pollution in a city. You have loads of different sources. You have loads of different people, millions of people in a city creating pollution through their cars, through their homes, through factories, through the transportation systems, through agriculture, whatever. There are all kinds of different sources of pollution in a city, and no expert has ever figured out how to get rid of all pollution from a city, right? We can make a difference. We can go and learn about the problem. We can look at why these things are happening and try to come up with ways to reduce it. But no one has solved that problem. So what we would do is if we were like wanting to look at a pollution problem or a waste problem in a certain community, we'd want to come together with some experts as well as some people who are from that community and work together to really gain a deep and broad understanding of what's going on before we started to try to propose ideas to fix that. So this is categorically different. Complicated, you take it to the person who knows what needs to be done, they look at the problem, and they figure out a solution for you with the expertise they have. Complex, it's a big, messy problem. The experts are fantastic to have on board, but they don't have ready-made solutions. So this is what we're trying to do, is separate these two sorts of problems and help you think about how should you approach these complex problems, and when should you put the resources into those sorts of problems. The last domain in his framework is called chaotic. This is something like the beginning of the pandemic, where no one knew anything.
Hello, Chris. I'm sorry, we can't hear you. We cannot hear you. You're on mute. Your microphone is on mute. We have lost sound since that wonderful framework that can apply to everybody on clear, complicated, chaotic, and complex. But we lost sound since. You're still on mute. Can you unmute your? Yeah. All right. But first thing is just to activate your sound just on the application. You're still on mute.
How did I get mute?
There you go. Now we can hear you.
That's so strange. I don't know what happened there. Sorry about that.
Yeah. No, go ahead. So yeah, so last thing we heard, we were still on the framework. You had just finished the 4C framework. Go ahead, please.
Okay, so did I get through chaotic on this? Did you guys hear that?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, I will try not to touch anything the rest of the way. Sorry about that. Okay, so this is a framework for decision making, for trying to determine whether you're dealing with what I call a complicated problem with Snowden's Cynefin framework, or a complex problem. So this is from the UK Civil Service. They have a systemic design toolkit. It's aimed at civil servants. They created this kit where they put in tools from systemic design, but they tried to make the language toned down and use the language of civil servants. So they tried to make a tool that was really easy for them to adopt, which I think is really cool. They created this little tool for people to look at the problem they're getting ready to address and think about, is this just a complicated problem on the left or a complex problem on the right? So you look at the problem is well understood. We know what causes it. There's solid evidence that our proposed actions will have the intended effects. That would be considered a non-complex or a complicated in the last slide problem. On the other side, we're not really sure we understand the problem, let alone the solution. That's definitely in the complex domain. Stakeholders, for non-complex, there is a high level of consensus among stakeholders and experts about what to do. If there's a broad agreement, you're not dealing with a complex problem, or maybe everyone's confused about what's going on, but assume that if there's broad consensus, you don't need to mess with systemic design. If there's significant diversity of opinion and even conflict among stakeholders and experts about what to do, you're probably dealing with a complex problem you need to understand better. Predictability of policy setting, they're in the policy arena, but this question is broadly applicable. So the problem is relatively self-contained and not intertwined with its broader environment, which is stable and predictable. So that's non-complex. There are many diverse and dynamic interconnections between the problem and the broader environment, which itself is unstable and dynamic, political, economic, etc. Complex. Ambition, it's a short-term goal versus we are aiming to make sustained change and broad scale. There's a wide gap between those two sets of questions. You're probably at times going to find stuff that's more in the middle, where you're going to feel like, well, maybe it's this or that. But if you're the idea here is, if it's pretty much on the non-complex side, then deal with it like you normally do. If it's pretty much to the complex side, then assume you need to do systemic design is going to be helpful. Systems thinking, helping you to understand the problem, is going to be useful. And if it's kind of in the middle, then spend a little extra time with it and try to figure out, which way do you think it needs to go? So adding it all up, if it's non-complex, probably apply other approaches to the problem. If it's a complex problem, systems thinking could be highly useful for helping my team grapple with this messy problem. So this is a nice, simple framework, and you can sit with this for 5 or 10 minutes and probably in most cases determine which direction you're likely to need to go. And when you're talking about doing systemic design, it's not going to be cheap, easy, or quick. You're talking about spending a lot of time up front trying to understand a problem really well before even thinking about what to do. So you want to make sure you're dealing with something that's worth spending those kinds of resources for. So these kinds of things, taking a look up front, really important. So we'll talk about a few interesting uses. It's Design for Health project in the UK, working to improve quality of healthcare. They're using a variety of methods, including systems thinking, design thinking, co-design, to develop new ways of delivering healthcare that are more patient-centered and efficient. There's a similar program that was going on in Canada a few years back. They looked at how they were delivering care and how patients were experiencing that, and then just fully redesigned the experience around the patient's needs. And they found ways to do things that were more efficient than what they had been doing while giving better quality of care to the patient. So it was actually cheaper. The doctors spent less time on things that were less important to patients, but they had a care team that was constantly communicating, handing off, and making sure that information wasn't being dropped and having to be re-inquired about from the patients. So some really neat things in healthcare. Wonder Waste is a really neat program that my colleague Jet did here in Bangkok, and I had a little hand helping him, but mostly he was working with local communities. They had an incinerator there where the efficiency was poor. They had a lot of moisture going into the incinerator. They had a lot of valuable materials going in there. They were pumping a lot of too much additional energy into the plant to keep the energy up or to keep the heat going, to keep the fire going. So it was really inefficient. What usually, I think, what I've seen in the past and hearing about these kinds of things, what will happen is, maybe there's like a decree or a policy change or whatever, and say, you can't do this anymore. Just, all they're trying to do then is trying to make sure that they get what they need going into the incinerator. In this case, what they did was they brought in some academics who do a lot of practical work, and they said, we want you to work with these 4 different communities, go and work with them, use the systemic design stuff. And what we want you to do is try to partner with the community and give us what we need, which is a better waste stream for the incinerator, but try to do it in a way that benefits the community. So what my colleague Jet did was he spent a lot of time going around observing what was going on, how were these systems working at that point, and then meeting with lots of community members, interviewing them, getting a better understanding of what they were doing, why they were doing it, what they believed to be true, and their motivating factors. And then they talked through possibilities. The community members devised their own change. And what they decided to do was, okay, well, if you want less moisture in the incinerator, we'll separate out the food waste. We'll also separate out the plastic waste, because that's valuable and it's useful resources. And so they have informal waste collectors in that community. They could take that plastic waste and get it to the informal waste collectors, and they'd sell it off into the recycling system. And it brought more income into the community through the plastic waste. With the food waste, as they separated that out of the waste stream, they would put it in a strainer by the sink and let it dry out before putting it into a bag, where it would be taken to a local farm in the community where they were growing produce for the community. By doing so, instead of it going out into the trash bin outside the home in the heat, over a period of weeks, there had been a bad smell that was kind of always hanging on that street from the waste bins. That basically went away. So in the end, what they did, they improved the waste stream going into the incinerator. So the incinerator's management who funded the project, they were happy. They got what they needed. The people in the community had more high quality produce being grown locally that was inexpensive. So an additional food source that was reasonably priced. The waste collectors had an additional source of income because more of the plastic was being collected instead of being burned and wasted in the incinerator. And it smelled nicer. It was a nicer place to live. You could walk down the street and breathe fresh air without the smell of putrescing produce in the street. So it was a really cool example of using this approach and working with a community. And the experts really didn't have a hand in designing this solution. I mean, they were there supporting when they put together this cart with the 3 cans, and then I think the experts were more involved when they shifted that to a electric bicycle cart that could drag through. Because this is a really small street that's constantly got traffic. They went with the bicycle cart approach to solve the problem of mobility in there. So really, really cool project that I love to talk about. So my experience, I just want to talk about more for just a minute. What we're doing there is I've worked for years with lots of different organizations that have lots of waste. And, I had my experience in the grocery industry where I would teach them, in the grocery industry, I was responsible for getting the waste out of landfill. That was a decree from management down. So, around the company, they would have to comply with what we were doing. When I got into consulting, I'd go around to a lot of companies and we'd talk through what the opportunities were. We'd find what their waste sources were. I would go and help them find multiple opportunities. And quite often they would be like, that's a really neat idea. That's a great idea, but we're not going to do that. That's not what our business does. So what we've done is we've started Morph so that we can start taking those opportunities to market. And the desire is to help people see what's out there, because there are just incredible mountains of resources that are being burned or thrown out to landfill. Now, if we're doing systemic design properly, we should be moving upstream and looking at opportunities and not create those waste as much as possible. But at least what we're trying to do is, turn these things into something useful, and then educate and advocate, and hopefully, as we're raising awareness, get more people to do what we're doing, as well as more people to change how they're living, how they're running their businesses, trying to get people to see the opportunity through systemic design to really rethink how we run our businesses. So some of the keys around systemic design. I believe things are getting serious with climate and related systems challenges. I hope that this year is a bit of an anomaly, and that next year things are more normal, and that we somehow buy some time. We get a little fortunate with the way things go over the next couple of years. I don't suspect that's what's coming our way. I mean, we're always going to have variability, but I think the trajectory seems to be more problematic. So systemic design offers us tools, frameworks, and perspectives to help deal with complex challenges. If you're running an organization, a business, you are certainly involved with complex challenges. And I implore you to take a look at what this can do to help you dig into those problems and try to come up with better solutions. There are a lot of organizations that are starting to use these approaches and rethink their approach to business and improve outcomes. One of the really interesting ones I just heard about recently, Ørsted, I think it's the Danish oil company. They went from about 2006, I think, they were still about 85% fossil fuel. And as of today, they're 99% renewable. They went down the path using a systemic change approach, and just completely overhauled their organization. So they're more and more interesting examples. I think the UK civil service, that they have gone down the path of systemic design. Civil service is just really, really cool. And it shows that this is resonating more and more, as there's a great need to head down this path. So
Chris,
I'm sorry. I'm going to need to call. Yep.
Chris, can you hear me? I'm sorry to interrupt you. We're running out of time. Is it possible
I'm
for you
basically
to wrap it
done.
up? Yeah, just in a minute.
Yeah, I'm basically done here. So I just wanted to give them a call to action. I think in this problem we have, in the circumstances we have, business leaders need to lead. We have the access to the resources and the opportunity to drive change. Please consider taking a hard look at this, and think of going into these problems. Quite often the problems we're talking about are ones where community and local government and other stakeholders are all have a hand in these problems. And we've got to look at how do we partner and align, rather than in the past trying to get what we want out of these. I think, so just one final thought. Thoreau said there are 1,000 hacking at the branches of he wasn't saying complex challenges, but I'm paraphrasing him, saying there are 1,000 hacking at the branches of complex challenges to one who is striking at the root. We need to focus on the roots. We need to deal with these problems. So that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much.
Great. Thank you so much, Chris. Thank you. Have a wonderful day. Thank you. Thank you for having joined us, and thank you for your insightful take on this. And
gladly. Thank you.
Thank you.